Okay, welcome. I'm going to try to get through this. There's a lot to show you. I understand that, people might have to get up and go for classes. No problem. Just get up and go when you need to, and I'll try to finish this up on time. What this talk will not be is a history of acupuncture or a technical explanation of acupuncture. It'll be about my work with Acupuncturists Without Borders, and it won't really be about the organization either, because this will be a story of the very early history of Acupuncturists Without Borders. They've since gone on to do quite amazing things. They have military stress recovery projects for vets all over the country now. They've treated people after the Midwest floods, the South California wildfires, the shootings in Aurora, Colorado recently, and in Tucson, Arizona. And they are also training acupuncturists to work in disaster situations all over the country. So my story today is a prequel, to all of that. So basically, you can think of acupuncture as a really big, beautiful old tree. It's got really deep roots, but it has a lot of branches. So what we're going to do today is just kind of take a walk out on one of these branches. And this particular branch starts in Taiwan. There's a whole history of acupuncture that's known as auricular acupuncture, using only the ear to treat the rest of the body. And it was used in clinics that were treating opium addicts, and what was noticed was that there was a great kind of peace and calm that would come over the patients when these particular points in the ear were used. Flash forward to the 1980s in New York City during the crack epidemic. Lincoln Hospital in the Bronx started treating addicts, and found that when they added these particular ear points into what they were already doing, their success rate went way up in treating addicts. And what was observed, again, was just this sort of peace and release of tension. So that became codified as what we call the NADA protocol. NADA stands for National Acupuncture Detox Association. And they teach this 5-point protocol. So flash forward then to 9/11, and in the Javits Center, responders were having their time to rest in the Javits Center, and there were many volunteer massage therapists and acupuncturists, and the acupuncturists started using this NADA protocol. And again, what was observed was that in this incredibly traumatic and tense situation, responders would just find themselves able to kind of let go of the tension they were holding. So flash forward to Hurricane Katrina, which struck the New Orleans area Monday, August 29th, 2005. And a woman named Diana Freed is an acupuncturist who has worked in a lot of non-governmental organizations and helping organizations. And she was well aware of this NADA protocol and some of these effects. So after Katrina, she started thinking, could we apply this very simple protocol in a disaster situation for populations that have been traumatized? And so she founded AWB, Acupuncturists Without Borders. And I won't read this whole thing. I'll let you read it. And she started to write about this possibility on the internet and some of the acupuncture chat rooms. And immediately she was flooded with volunteers, just saying, great, when can we go? And so she realized very quickly that this is a map of New Orleans and areas that were affected by flooding. And so basically, that's where I come in. I got a call from Diana saying, we have over 100 volunteer acupuncturists who want to go to New Orleans to work. How can we do this? Would you be willing to go down to New Orleans and start finding venues that would be appropriate? You know, one, would it be even appropriate to do acupuncture in a situation like this? And two, where, given the disaster situation? And so I thought about that for about 10 seconds and said, yes, okay, let's go. So 4 of us went down 2 months after the hurricane hit. This is what we found. These are photographs taken in the lower 9th Ward. There were certainly areas of the city that were not affected. And where we landed, we made, so really what I'm going to show you today is a kind of history of an improvisation, because we didn't really have any plan. Before we left, over the web, we made contact with a New Orleans acupuncturist who actually had evacuated, but his house was sound, and he said, well, you could stay there for a few days, but then I'm coming back and I'm going to have to do work on it. So we had a few days of a house in Algiers Point. If you know New Orleans, it's it's across the Mississippi River from downtown, and it's a higher elevation, so it didn't have this kind of damage. And here 2 months later, there were still large areas guarded because they were still finding bodies in the ruins. Basically, by the time we got there, streets were made passable, but that was about it. A large majority of the population was not there or was just beginning to return to find what was left. Many of the houses had this code, which were codes that would tell when the house was searched, if anybody was found, any animals. And everything in the flooded areas was covered with this layer of a combination of sewage, toxic sludge. It was quite, well, as you can see, it was not like anything I had experienced before. So in terms of this improvisation, we were in this house trying to decide, okay, where do we go? What do we do? And basically, this restaurant in Algiers Point was the start. We found this restaurant that had power, it had internet, and it had food. So we spent a lot of time there, as well as many other volunteers. So there were FEMA volunteers, there were all kinds of federal officials, firemen. This became kind of a nexus. There's Diana on the computer. And basically we found that really the thing to do was just to talk to people, start asking questions, stop people on the sidewalk. What's happening, what's going on, where are you guys doing relief work? And through that, we found an amazing organization called Common Ground. Common Ground was a volunteer organization of pretty much at first young people who were in New Orleans 2 days after the hurricane. And they found a mosque in Algiers Point, and the mosque said, yes, you can have our building for a free health clinic. And again, through the internet, word really spread about the work that Common Ground was doing. This is the mosque. And doctors, nurses, medical students, herbalists, all kind of descended on this mosque. So by the time we got there, there was already this kind of working free clinic for the people of New Orleans. This turned out to be the sort of golden key for us to know where to begin and where to start treating people and where to establish venues to offer acupuncture, because Common Ground had already set up some clinics. So they were very welcoming. They were like, yeah, you know, great, we're glad you're here, come with us. So the first thing, as our days in the acupuncturist's house were running out, that they made possible was in the sewage treatment plant of Algiers Point, there was this whole tent community for disaster responders. And so they steered us there, and they were very welcoming. It was quite amazing. We were given a tent. The whole infrastructure of disaster work was something I had no experience with. It was really amazing. I mean, this is a mobile unit with a complete kitchen that will feed 800 people a day. And so we were getting breakfast, dinner, and a bagged lunch to take out. It was, you know, a bit ironic and a little poignant because, you know, we were well aware of we've stumbled into the situation as relief workers and what was going on for the population as a whole, but nonetheless it made our work possible. So every day we would have a planning session. Where are we going? What are we doing? We did have one car, so how are we going to get people around? And basically we developed treatment kits, which you see in this little plastic file box. That was all we needed. So we could set up in some areas that were quite nasty and treat and create what we call a clean field and treat people. So our first clinic was established at the mosque under the auspices of Common Ground. And the thing that's really wonderful about this is our first clinic on the sidewalk. The thing that's really wonderful about the NADA protocol is that you can do it anywhere. It's very simple. There's no need for somebody to undress. There's no need for somebody to lie down. You're just needing to expose the ears. It's an interesting complement to talk therapy. A lot of the trauma counseling involves talking. So also it can be done in places where language might be a barrier or cultural barriers, and we certainly found that in Haiti. So talk really doesn't matter in this situation. And what we started to see was what I told you earlier that has been reported in other situations. People would, the first thing that would often happen is somebody would sit down in their chair, they would receive the needles in the ear, and they would just be right out. And the stories people would tell us were the same from venue to venue. Many would say, you know, I was trapped in the convention center for days, I saw family members die, or I was trapped in my house in the flooding and lost family members, and I haven't slept since then, and I'm suffering from insomnia, you know, really typical symptoms of what we would call post-traumatic stress syndrome. And people would come back and say, oh, I slept through the night for the first time. So this this just shows some of the places where we ended up treating, although in the subsequent teams that came down, eventually there were 40 venues throughout New Orleans established. It was a very fluid situation. Some would close, we would find others. So again, it was kind of an improvisation. And this was one of our schedules, trying to figure out each day, what do we do, where do we go, how do we coordinate it. As I said, the firefighters of New York had experienced acupuncture after 9/11, and that was a great moment because we found this encampment of New York and firefighters from many different areas. And we walked up and started talking, and they were like, "Hey guys, the acupuncturists are here." And you know, everybody was like really psyched because they had experienced it before. Some acupuncturists from Chicago. We would treat anybody. That's the other thing that's kind of wonderful about this treatment, is it's free. And we would treat first responders, relief workers, military, police, and many traumatized citizens. Red Cross workers. This woman's from Almond. We met down in the lower ninth ward. A really wonderful community that we treated in a lot was the Mary Queen of Vietnam Church. This is in far east New Orleans, and they had really significant damage because it was closer to where Katrina really made landfall. And because of their traditions, they were very, very welcoming of the acupuncture. This is Father Luke. And their church was very, very strong, and even though the community was dispersed, they would come back on Sundays to the church, and so we would treat them after church. And this is an example of our little kit where we would set up a clean field and be able to do the treatments just from these things here. Also, something else that we found that's very powerful about this particular NADA protocol is it's not done in isolation. Oftentimes in post-traumatic stress situations, one is feeling very isolated. And these treatments are done with everybody receiving them at the same time. It's not like you're each in a room. So, for instance, everybody here is receiving a treatment. So there is something quite powerful about breaking that isolation and kind of reestablishing community by receiving the treatment as a group. We think of it as kind of energetically resetting the reset button, if you will, for the nervous system. It just allows the body, mind, and spirit to kind of catch its breath. And quite literally, that's something we'd hear from people, that they're even having trouble breathing because of the anxiety they're experiencing. So these are all treatments in the Vietnamese community. And the first team with Father Luke. And we also treated, as I say, military. This is the first time I'd ever had somebody need to put their automatic weapon down before they had an acupuncture treatment. We treated FEMA in an installation in St. Bernard's Parish in a Walmart that had just washed away in the parking lot, as well as the New Orleans Library, which had been taken over by FEMA headquarters. And these people really needed treatment because they were the brunt of so much frustration on people's part. These were really good people doing their best in a really difficult situation, constrained by a bureaucracy. So there was a lot of frustration on citizens' parts focused on FEMA, so they loved the treatment. So, like, this is in the New Orleans library after hours, where we would go and treat them. And we would treat in parks. This was a really great group. The Rainbow family showed up, and this is in Washington Square Park, just in the Meringue outside, just outside of the French Quarter. And they were feeding people for free 3 meals a day, because at this point there was still no power in this area, even 2 months, after the hurricane. So this was their outdoor kitchen, and this was our outdoor clinic. And then in St. Bernard's Parish, again, this is just one of these improvisatory moments. We were headed somewhere, and I just happened to look out the window, and it was like, what is that geodesic dome? And again, the Rainbow family, you know, I don't quite know where they got the resources, but they were getting donations. And so they were providing 3 meals a day free for all the residents in St. Bernard's Parish. So we set up a clinic under the dome. It was quite amazing. And then we also worked in Kenner, which is out near the New Orleans airport, in a Honduran community. So everything had to be translated. And as often would happen, people would be like, I don't know about this acupuncture thing. Needles, does it hurt? So oftentimes I would be the guinea pig, and they would put the needles in, and they would see that I wasn't screaming or flinching, and then they would say, okay, we'll try it. And then really all it took, and this happened over and over again, was one person would receive the needles and quite often just kind of let go and go right to sleep. And immediately everybody was like, I want that. So this was in the Honduran community. And so these are, I went down twice. Once in this very initial stage to figure out the venues, which we were successful at. And that allowed subsequent teams to come down and work. And I went down a second time in December of 2005 to be a team leader and work with subsequent people coming down. And you know, once we had the venue set up, we had lots of things written out. You know, people could kind of drop into the situation kind of cold and know where to go and know the protocols. So it was quite successful. New Orleans, Acupuncturists Without Borders time in Haiti was very successful. There were approximately 8,000 treatments given with approximately 14 teams. So we're going to flash forward to 2010 and Haiti. What occurs there on Tuesday, January 12, 2010 is a 7 magnitude earthquake. 52 aftershocks, 3,000 people affected in some way, 316,000 dead, 300,000 injured, and 1 million homeless. So these are some photographs right after the earthquake. These are not photographs that I took. But again, Diana Freed of Acupuncturists Without Borders said, okay, you know, let's do our first international work. And just that in itself, that it was international, provided many, many hurdles. Diana found somebody with a private jet who was flying relief supplies into Port-au-Prince, and so she went with a small group and established some very initial contacts, came back to the United States, and these are some of the tent communities. She came back to the United States, the National Cathedral in Port-au-Prince, and I got the call saying, we need a team to go in and really establish venues in Haiti. Would you consider it? This time it took a few minutes, but then said, of course. So this was the presidential palace, which was completely destroyed. So 3 acupuncturists, including myself, got ready to go. We found, and again, it's these improvisatory sort of fruitful moments that that really open things up. And so again, over the internet, we made contact with a woman in Portland, Maine, who was not an acupuncturist, but she had lived in Port-au-Prince and still had a house there, and a house that survived. And she was willing to go with us and translate and let us live in her house. So with that moment and that contact, the doors just opened. So we arrived in Port-au-Prince, again, 2 months after the disaster. So the beginning of March in 2010. This was, let's see if I can get this to work. This was the ride from the airport. Again, at this point when we arrived, streets had been made passable, but that was about the point of things. This is right across the street from the presidential meetings. And another very common scene in front of some of the UN encampments, people... So Victoria, our host and translator, this was her house, just on the outskirts of Port-au-Prince. And this is where we stayed. This was our kitchen. The first place we went to work was a contact that Diana had made in her previous trip, and this was the University Hospital in Port-au-Prince. They were totally overwhelmed. 95% of their buildings were rendered unusable and unsafe to be in. So most of the clinics were happening in tents like these, as well as patient wards and beds were in tents outside, all over the grounds. So they were so overwhelmed. So they were very, very welcoming, and they basically just turned us loose. I mean, they just said, "We're so glad you're here. Do what you think is appropriate. Work in the areas that you think is appropriate." So, as you see in this picture, Victoria in the center, and I'll show you a video in a little bit, would, in Creole, give an introduction as to what we were offering, and people would elect to receive a treatment or not. There would be patients in beds, but then many family members too. So both patients and family members oftentimes wanted to be treated. This was a situation different from New Orleans, in that in New Orleans people knew about acupuncture and would say acupuncture and they would like, oh yeah, the Chinese stuff, needles, you know, they sort of got it. In Haiti there was no cultural context. And so Victoria was fantastic for really giving a very good intro. But again, aside from the language or knowing anything about it, people oftentimes would receive the needles immediately, boom, right to sleep, and everybody was like, I want that. So that would get them over their trepidation of the needles. This is how we traveled. We had some drivers that were associated with Victoria's family, and we would drive in this pickup. These are, I just love these. These are some of the Haitian buses. Then we went out to Léogâne. Léogâne was the epicenter of the earthquake, about 25 miles west of Port-au-Prince. This is on a highway out to Léogâne. These are shanties and makeshift homes in the median strip of the highway. Léogâne was completely destroyed. When we got there, I mean, it was just shocking. It was just practically just total rubble. There was no governmental infrastructure. And so again, it was just an improvisation. We just got there and just got out of the truck. Victoria started talking to people, just getting a sense of, okay, what's happening here? Trying to get a sense if there were organizations or centers that had been set up, which we did find. We found this amazing organization, again, all of young people. That was very inspiring. Hands-on disaster response. And they had taken over a factory building that had been abandoned but was structurally sound. And they were coming, their volunteers were coming from all over the world, and basically their task at that time was just to clear rubble. So that's what they're doing. And so on their day off, we offered them treatments, and that was very appreciated. And you can see some of the bunk beds that they had built, and very impressive organization. Anyway, they sent us then to a tent encampment on the outskirts of Léogâne, and this is where the population was living. And we met Jean-Marie Xavier. It was a wonderful moment. We walked up to talk with him, and there he was reading a book about acupuncture and acupressure, and we were like, wait a minute. And you know, he was trying to come up with ways to help. He was the sort of de facto head of this encampment because there was no governmental structure. So this is Victoria in Creole introducing acupuncture to the community there in tent encampment.
Activer pour parce que stressé, il y a une douleur, ou pas gagner équilibre. Le médecin dans l'oréa commencer à sentir équilibre. Mesdames, mandel. Vous dormez bien, oui? Oui. Après ça, dormez bien. Peut-être, le wap prendre, le wap chiter qu'on y a là, pas commencer à dormir. Peut-être parce que faut le poser 30 minutes et pas fermer les yeux. Et puis, après ça, vous semblez relax.
So here in Léogâne, again, it was just a good example of what we had seen over and over, that this population that had been so traumatized and continued to really struggle with food and shelter had no real cultural context for acupuncture. But again, as soon as they saw the results of people just relaxing and being able to kind of let go of some of their tension, the word went through the camps, and we had people just lining up outside, and we treated hundreds of people there in this encampment. We then went back to Port-au-Prince, and this is Cusqueya University. This was the brand new medical school of Port-au-Prince for Haiti, completely destroyed. And they were carrying on classes in tents on the campus, which you see here. Acupuncturists Without Borders has since gone back to this school and done a training for Haitians to do acupuncture. That was something we felt was really important because the whole history of Haiti is such a history of things being done to the country or for the country in its best interest by some other country. And we just felt it was really important not to just come in, do treatments, and leave. And so subsequently there have been training sessions for Haitians to start learning acupuncture, and 33 citizens have gone through the training. This is Sister Mary. This is another place we found. She runs the Matthew 25 house in Port-au-Prince, and these were tents brought in by the Lions Club and Sean Penn's organization. And again, we treated in the backyard there under a tarp. And this was the team. And I just wanted to end with just some portraits of people from New Orleans and Haiti. And then I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. We have time. Jean-Marie Xavier from Léogâne at the tent encampment, a few weeks after we got home, we got this email from him. And again, this happened after I was there, but these are the diploma-holding citizens who had gone through the AWB training, who in some cases now have their own clinics and are doing acupuncture work in Haiti. And if you want to know more about the organization, just go to acuwithoutborders.org, and there will be a huge amount to learn, and you'll find out more about their subsequent work, and particularly their work with vets, which is very, very necessary, I think, and very interesting. So, yeah, if there's a little time before you have to leave, I'd be glad to answer any questions that anybody might have.